Hey GQ, I'm Ben Affleck, and I'm going to answer a question about almost every movie I've done. That was too loud.
Good Will Hunting. How did you and Matt get into the mind of a genius?
Well, as far as I know, neither Matt nor I are geniuses. So getting into the mind of a genius wasn't going to literally be, or even metaphorically be possible. But I mean, the idea of a character who has special abilities is very appealing. I think it's at the root of the wish fulfillment stuff in Marvel. I mean, if you just think of any superhero, right? It's like, I seem like an everyday, ordinary high school kid or just getting, thrown against the locker, but actually I'm Spider-Man. Part of the trick is to not have to show the whole thing, but to sort of hint at it, the discovery of him solving the theorem. I mean, obviously, Matt and I could no more do multivariable calculus than we could the kind of math that, we couldn't even name the math that he was doing, matrix multiplication or whatever in the hallways of MIT. So we knew there was a sort of, okay, we're going to have to get some expert to fill this in. But the idea that it would come from an unexpected person, Stellan's character is like, who did this? He's asking his class that they never would expect that this guy who's working there cleaning the building was special, I think had some appeal to us, probably for me, because my father had that job at Harvard, was a janitor. I think at the time, I like a lot of young people and maybe even older people really wanted to have my dad to be a hero. And I think I took some of that and into that sort of idea, but we really just, faked it. And when we had to have elaborate, sophisticated mathematical solutions, we had to call on people who could do that. We heard that on Star Trek, when they were going to write their sci-fi stuff, the writers would just say tech, tech, tech. So we did it. And then people were like, I'm sorry, what is the tech? We were like, oh, we thought that was a thing. That's not how you do it in the show business. And they were like, no one does that. And then, we had mathematicians at MIT who kind of, and by the way, they could have been totally making it up. You know what I mean? We looked at it like, yeah, that looks good. Like, yeah, okay, guys, you got.
Batman versus Superman, Dawn of Justice. Do you have any regrets?
No, I had a great time. I love being in Detroit. I really love Zack. Chris Terrio was the writer who I love. And I really liked the core notion of this superhero who, has this very iconic kind of legendary, image in the public consciousness, and who people kind of thought of one kind of way, which was very strong and very powerful and all that stuff. And trying to find the reality in that, which was a guy who's kind of aging and past that prime and has to has aches and pains, and very much inspired by the Frank Miller graphic novel, The Dark Knight, where Superman and Batman, are in conflict. And I love doing it and love making it. And I guess my regret about that movie is that when I went to show it to my son at the time, so I thought, okay, this is it. He was totally too scared to watch it. So I lost out on that thing of kind of being Batman to my son. Now he's old enough and he's like, you were Batman, right? At one point, a long time. I'm like, just don't worry about it.
Dazed and Confused. Was this anything like your high school experience?
The experience, that movie was very similar to my high school in some ways, kind of high school drama. You have all of these kids who are trying to figure out who they are and what they're going to do with their life. And so everything feels very big and momentous. And they're not wrong in a way. When I think back of high school, those 4 years, it seems like a much bigger period of life than, say, some other arbitrary 4 years in my 30s or 40s. That still feels kind of like when your identity is formed. And I think that's what Rick touched on and grabbed. And he also just wanted to make it real and consistent with his experience. I learned one of the most important lessons I've ever learned on that movie, which is that he really welcomed and solicited input and partnership on all the actors to come up with ideas and write lines. And then he made the movie evolved with that. And I didn't know you could do that. And I wasn't even able to try to do it until much later. But I remembered how exhilarating it was. Even though the movie bombed, it was a disaster of a movie commercially. It was sort of oh, I remember reading in something that was oh, how embarrassing, but I liked it. And I'm really glad that it, attained the kind of sort of, I guess, cult status that it has.
Gone Girl. Who is the real villain here?
I don't know if there is a specific villain in Gone Girl. I think that's one of the things that makes it interesting is that you keep changing your estimation of these characters as the movie goes along and reveals more to you, and as it gets both darker and even a little bit more, almost absurdist in a way. David Fincher, who I love and adore, one of the things that he's really good at is understanding the way that movies work. I mean, such a sort of masterful director. He understands what the expectations are of a movie like that, what the tropes are, what we're all used to, and then confounding those and subverting them so that, like, as you point out, this person's not necessarily who they would be in every other movie, and so who we kind of subconsciously expect them to be. And obviously Gillian, wrote a terrific book that I had a huge success because I think it engaged people and she touched on I think in a lot of ways, some of the frustrating, contradictory expectations for relationships and women in particular, the sort of cool girl monologue people have, talked about a lot. And I had the sense that really resonated with women. And David kind of has a dark comic sensibility. And so he kind of played with the genre in fun ways. And then, became this very dark movie, but it also never lost its sense of fun.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Tell us what happened here.
My voice was removed from my performance. I'm not sure that they meant for me to have a line, so I may have been paid as a featured extra, but I know I said a line and they recorded it, so I'd like to think it was some union thing that they re-recorded my performance, but maybe the director was just like, this guy's so bad, we need someone else to say, take it.
Take it, man.
Armageddon. What was the coolest set piece you got to play with?
I got to walk onto the space shuttle, be at Cape Canaveral, Cape Kennedy. They let me go into it's hardly even in the movie, wear an actual spacesuit and go into they have this huge tank full of water with a life-size space shuttle built in there to try to simulate weightlessness for repairing the shuttle. And they let us go in that thing, briefly. That's a very rarefied experience. And I was surrounded by all these astronauts. And that's where I started realizing these people are very highly skilled and trained. And we're doing a movie where it's easier to, train oil drillers to be astronauts than it is to train astronauts to drill a hole in the ground. But it was an incredible opportunity. And I'm really lucky that I got a chance to be in some of those kind of, I think of as in a way, old-fashioned movies where you traveled around the globe and went to real places. Because as visual effects came along, you stopped having to go to, now they just put the space shuttle in behind you. We actually filmed the space shuttle takeoff. It was amazing.
Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. Who wrote Good Will Hunting 2 Hunting Season?
Kevin came up with that idea, and fortunately that script is only as much has been written as is in that movie. But that was all to Kevin's credit. It was a very funny idea. And that was that point where there was so much of just Good Will Hunting around us that we kind of wanted to sort of, I don't know, take the wind out of it or make fun of it or get away from it, I think. It's the sort of stupid solipsistic ideas you have when, you're in that kind of position.
Phantoms.
I was the bomb at Phantoms. Everyone knows that. Peter O'Toole, by the way. Peter O'Toole signed my Lawrence of Arabia poster that's out there on Phantom. Nicky Katt, Liev Schreiber. I loved doing that movie. Well, no, I didn't love doing the movie, but I liked those people. The movie was a sewer monster movie, let's face it. And I was a sheriff in Colorado. I was 20 years old. It was totally absurd. And the movie was utter garbage, but I did get to ski. I made $100,000. So I was I'm set for life. I'm retiring. And I met Peter O'Toole and got stoned with Peter O'Toole. And what else happens in my life that tops this? Nothing.
Gigli. What did you learn?
I learned to kind of the basics of directing and what I know about directing from Marty Brest on that movie. Marty had done Midnight Run and Son of a Woman and Beverly Hills Cop and Going in Style and Meet Joe Black, and he was wonderful and loving. And I also learned that you have to take big swings. One of the most important movies of my career. Had I not done that, I probably would have lived too much in fear of failure.
The Town. What films influenced you?
The Town, I've found it helpful to look at other films when I'm going to direct something, not to copy it or steal it, although if I can steal something, sometimes it's I'm certainly not above it. I find it helpful because it kind of lets me communicate also to the other filmmakers involved in making it, whether it's the cinematographer, the actors, the gaffer, whoever, and say, this is sort of what I'm trying to do. For The Town, Heat was chief among them for obvious reasons, I think. There was also there's a movie called The Friends of Eddie Coyle that I thought was a really interesting, darker look at characters, particularly in Boston. I had done a lot of action sequences and sort of kinetic stuff as an actor, but not as a director. And so that was intimidating and daunting. I had an idea about what I wanted to do and a belief sort of that I could do it. But to be honest, I was quite scared. It was also a movie where if that hadn't worked, probably, it would have been the last movie certainly that you saw me as an actor in. That was an authentically sort of comeback time. There wasn't a huge appetite demand for me to be in movies and I really kind of used directing as a way to redefine myself as an actor because I wanted to do it on my own terms and according to what my instincts were about it. And I was willing to really fail in that capacity if that was the case, but I at least wanted to do it on my own terms. And I knew that in order to get a larger audience and connect people to the movie and provide some kind of familiar guardrails in a way that people could get through that movie, I wanted to combine those genres of like the robbery, the chase, with the drama. And in a way, that still informed my interest in movies like The Accountant 2, which I think is similar in a lot of ways.
The Accountant. How did you research playing a neurodivergent character?
For the first Accountant movie, I did do a lot of traditional research in terms of spending a lot of time in schools and around similarly neurodivergent people, old and young, and it's a role that I have a lot of affection and fondness for. I find the character is sort of a weird thing. It's a very actory thing to say, like I like this character, but it's true. I do. It's fun. There's a wit and a lovely kind of dry wit that it comes with a tendency to be very honest, which I find extremely appealing and charming and quite vulnerable in a way when a person kind of is willing to just lay bare the truth rather than lay on a bunch of the sort of masks that we put on in, polite society or whatever.
The Accountant 2. What made you excited to come back to this story?
The Accountant 2 was something I was really, really excited about for a number of reasons. One, I really loved the first movie and I loved the experience of doing it. And in the years since then, often people come up to me and say, I really liked, that movie and name The Accountant. That movie in particular had a really kind of enthusiastic following. Like people liked it. It was like a modest hit theatrically, but it really benefited from the emergence of streaming. So I feel like a lot more people saw it. And I love the part and the character. I thought like there was an opportunity to lean into the warmth and humanity of the character and explore the brothers' relationship. And I'm personally very interested in finding a way to make movies that, would be considered like very commercial, very accessible, very broad, and infusing those with the kind of like humanity and hopefully like nuance and complexity and honesty that we kind of associate with dramas, I guess, because that's what I'm interested in. I want to try to make those movies broadly appealing.
Daredevil. Why'd you want to do this movie?
I love the comic book. And I loved working with Mike Duncan and Colin and Jen Garner, and it wasn't the adaptation ultimately that like I thought was the best version of what it could have been, and that was disappointing.
The Flash. Was this your favorite Batsuit?
I hated the Batsuits. The Batsuits are horrendous to wear. They're incredibly hot, for one thing. They don't breathe. They're made to look the way they want them to look, and there's no thought put into the human being. And so what happens is that you just start sweating. Now, I sweat, you know what I mean? I get hot. And so in that thing, it would just be pouring water because it's got the cowl over it. Like there's one thing to wear the suit, but once you cover your head, I guess that's where all your heat kind of escapes. And you feel it. Even the like most highly trained, much more fit stunt guys, the parkour guys, the action guys, they could do that for about like 45, 50 minutes. And then they are like going to get heat stroke. So you had to come out of it. And that was really the thing, was that it just made it difficult to make the movie because it was so hot. And it also does not make you feel very heroic because you're instantly exhausted and really sweaty and kind of trying to hide like the sweat pouring down your face. Like, no, we can go again. I'm fine. I'm good. And the eye black is like running. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe, Christian or Rob or guys like that were just better at dealing with it. But I found it to be the least fun part of it.
Argo. Is it true that you would have loved to have turned this into a miniseries?
It's not that I would have loved to have made it into a miniseries. It's that if Argo were made today, first of all, it would not be released theatrically. I think the conventional wisdom, even at the time, was dramas, period dramas in particular, particularly about like true life, like even political adjacent events, do not succeed theatrically. And now I'm sure that sense that there wouldn't even be any willingness to take a risk on it. So what it would be something more like, like the best example I can think of is like Chernobyl on HBO. It's a spectacular limited series that really delved into that event, which I think is still one of the best things I've seen in recent years. It's amazing. And that would have afforded more latitude to kind of look at all of the various underpinnings and complexities and pressures brought to bear on all the relative parties. And also maybe some more fun with the Hollywood stuff and the notions of fantasy and the universality of storytelling and that kind of thing. And if I was going to explore more about it, I think I would explore a lot more around how it is that we arrived at a place in 1979 where the embassy was overthrown. I tried to do that, in this very brief credit sequence, but there's a lot more there to examine that I think is interesting.
Air. Why did it take so long for this story to be told?
I have no idea. It's a great story. I think maybe Michael Jordan needed to be kind of enshrined in history in a way where there was a little bit of distance. There's nobody that more powerfully exemplifies greatness than Michael Jordan. And in a lot of ways, it's very similar thematically. When you think about it just in terms of like somebody spectacular, it's like a superhero story, really. It's an origin story, but it's a real life genius story. It's a different kind of genius, but it's a genius nonetheless. As soon as I read it, I thought like, this is the story to tell.
Justice League. What makes the Snyder Cut special?
Somebody sent me something that showed me like the Snyder Cut of the Justice League was my highest rated movie on IMDb, which I was like, found quite interesting. And I think it's because one of the things, the Snyder Cut, so to speak, is actually really the movie that Zack wanted to make. You have a director with a very clear idea of the kind of story they understand and want to tell and they know. And then you've got like a commercial expectation, like for example, like a very valuable like IP property, et cetera. And so sometimes they'll hire this person for their distinctive take and view and then want to impose on that something different. And the tension between those two things, I think, was very difficult and caused the first movie to feel very much like neither fish nor fowl, which happens. What I was really glad about was that Zack got the chance to go back and make the movie that he very much wanted to make. A lot of like long slow motion sequences and stuff in black and white, very much like R-rated. That's, if you want to get Zack to direct a movie, you should make a Zack movie. One of the things about directing is typically you want to have it be closest to what that director is interested in and finds appealing. And so that movie is very much what Zack's vision was. And it's a rare thing that somebody gets the chance to go back and revisit and try to do what they wanted to do. And given the difficulty of that movie, I was very happy for Zack that he got a chance to do that.
Gone Baby Gone. Does Casey take your direction well?
Casey has very strong ideas about how he wants to play scenes because he's a great actor, to be fair. What I've learned about directing is that you've got to have a point of view and you've got to lead, but you've also got to listen. You've got this opportunity to hear from a lot of other brilliant people, and I truly believe it's a collaborative experience. And in that case, Casey, did amazing stuff that I wouldn't have envisioned. And I'm glad that, that was a collaborative experience. And to my credit, I knew how good he was, I think, before other people did. Although he was in the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford right before Gone Baby Gone came out. And I think he got nominated for that movie. So I didn't get to kind of ta-da with Casey, but nonetheless, you would be unwise to work with any actor and not have a two-way communication about how it's going to be. And also when someone's your brother, they don't respect you. So, you can't expect them to listen to you.
Pearl Harbor. Did you initially turn it down?
I never definitely turn it down. They sent me the script. I sort of thought about it. I went and met with them, talked about it, and then ultimately they really wanted to make sort of Titanic, I guess. Certainly, I mean, everyone wanted to make Titanic in the sense that it was the biggest movie ever made, but also sort of tonally and thematically. Didn't quite end up being that. It sort of ended up being Armageddon in the Second World War, but it was a hell of a lot of fun and an honor to do because I spent a lot of time with Medal of Honor winners. I got to do a boot camp with like real U.S. Army soldiers, like pre-Ranger training camp, and it was probably the most fascinating and moving personal experience to be on all these aircraft carriers and working alongside so many men and women in the military, and just to get to travel and to do a movie of that scale was pretty amazing.
Shakespeare in Love. Why didn't you want to play Shakespeare?
I read that script. It remains the best script that I've ever read. I was never going to play a lead. When I read that, Joe Fiennes was playing the lead. I read it because I was dating Gwyneth at the time, or I don't know if I read it because of that, but I remember that she was going to be in it. I read it and loved that character. It was like the actor who's full of himself. And I thought it was very funny. And more than that, like the idea of like a Tom Stoppard screenplay, to me just seemed like this is amazing. This brilliant guy has actually written a screenplay for the movies, and it was the best screenplay I've ever read. I loved it, and I loved making the movie, and it was a thrill and an honor to do. Chasing
Amy. How do you feel like this film has aged?
At the time, what I thought was sort of interesting about it was that it kind of alluded to a spectrum of sexual orientation, because there was, to me, it was very suggestive around the homosexuality between the two friends, or the relationship. What does a love relationship between men look like too? You love this other man. We have friendships with men that we love very much. And it was a way of looking at, well, how is this also similar to like homosexual relationships, or maybe there's a sort of, again, a continuum or a spectrum. And I thought that was kind of honest. And frankly, I found myself having to challenge my own kind of internalized homophobia, because I found it so difficult to kiss Jason. And I thought, like, this is really embarrassing. Like, this is clearly some internalized thing, because why should that be a difficult thing to do for me? And I still think I did an unconvincing job of it, and feel very disappointed by that. And I would love the chance to do better at that. Although, of course, now I'm not sure that the idea of playing a gay character would be welcome, or I might be like aversive to that, because I think, well, I don't want to, offend anyone in this direction. It was a movie that, like, at the time, sort of felt like it was pushing some boundaries. And in retrospect, as often happens, like, the world has evolved.
The Last Duel. How do you and Matt keep your working relationship fresh?
That movie was we having written it with Nicole and really being interested in the kind of experimental notion of the idea of point of view, and that, that we really do, as people, bring into any interaction with one another our history, our acculturation, our trauma, our hopes, our expectations, and view the present moment through the prism of that glass. You can really walk away from the same experience, the same conversation, with different ideas in retrospect about sort of what took place. It was also a story about the vestigial aspect of the patriarchy that we've sort of inherited culturally, and looking at what those looked like kind of run riot, to me seemed to be informative and telling about the present day, kind of in keeping with the theme of this discussion. And yet that was 2020 or something, and here 4 or 5 years later, that seems like a long time ago.
Dogma. What did Kevin Smith tell you and Matt about this story?
Well, I don't really have a very firm grasp on the nuances of the conversations we had. I know that Matt and I read that script. I read it when I was doing Chasing Amy, and I loved the script of Dogma and really viewed Chasing Amy as an audition for Dogma. And I remember that we left Pittsburgh filming Dogma to go back for the Oscars, when Matt and I won the Oscar for writing. And I remember that was a time in my life where, like, one day was one thing and the next day was something totally different. And I think in retrospect, it's because that was the most viewed Oscars in however long, because of Titanic. And so we happened to kind of be riding the coattails of that. And I think a hell of a lot more people knew who we were from seeing us as the kids who won the Oscar on the show than from watching the movie at the time. But nonetheless, I felt like I left the set one day kind of anonymous and came back, and there was like people outside my trailer that want my autograph, and I thought like, this is a prank. I thought Kevin like made it playing a joke on us.
School ties. Do you think this was your career launcher?
I mean, I kind of did at the time, but I only had like 3 lines. Once again, I was this incredibly unlikable, like horrible anti-Semitic bully. That's when I started being like, what is it about me that people, what am I giving off? Like these bully vibes. Nonetheless, I was thrilled to do it. And, you know, that was very much like, it was all these other young actors, and they were all people who I was auditioning for the same stuff with, and we all hung out and had a good time, and Matt had a great part, and obviously I was friends with Matt, and so it was nice to do that with him. But even I think halfway through, I was like, this might not be the big break for me.
Mallrats. How did Kevin Smith pitch this to you?
Kevin didn't pitch it to me. I came in and auditioned for that movie and read the sides. At the time, I was playing a lot of guys that, you know, throw teenagers into lockers. And I was at risk of becoming like a professional on-screen bully. And I really didn't want to play that part. But because I was such a fan of Clerks, I went in and auditioned for it. And I just sucked up to Kevin until he cast me.
Smokin Aces. What was fun about this for you?
Joe Carnahan put me in that movie, and I liked the idea of like, this is a guy you think is like going to be in the movie and a lead in the movie, and he gets killed right away. I thought that was really fun. I remember Chris Pine in that movie, and Joe reminded me recently that I said, if there's anybody I would love to have like if I could like buy stock in an actor early, it would be this actor. He's really good. He had a small part in that movie, but I thought this guy's good and funny and really good looking, you know, so I thought, well, his things are going to pan out for him, so I can say I did call that.
Extract. Did Mike Judge do Beavis and Butthead on set?
He didn't, but I sometimes do that when my son's on TikTok too long and he says, like, nuts. And I'm like, oh, nuts, ass, oh, balls. Just saying balls is not funny. There's no wit in that. Just saying balls or penis. Like, why is that a joke? Sorry. One of my favorite performances of mine of all time. I love Extract. I love the movie. I love Mike Judge. I love Jason Bateman. I love J.K. Simmons. It was spectacular.
Jersey Girl. Tell us about working with George Carlin.
Oh my God. I love doing that movie too. I love Kevin. We had a beautiful time together. Vilmos Sigmund shot that movie. Jen was great. Liv was great. And George Carlin was such a, Raquel, the actress who played the young girl. You know, by the way, she's like, whatever, 30 now or some crazy thing. But George was a wonderful guy and a hero of mine. And to get to work with him and get to know him was an honor and a treat.
Jay and Silent Bob Reboot. Is there something that really resonates with you about this movie?
There's a lovely monologue about fatherhood in that movie. The words of which I still remember, which are like, becoming a father means that you're not the star, you're the stage. And that has like resonated with me and been true. And I think it's a lovely way of articulating the transition and the kind of real meaning of life that's discovered in that process.
Hollywoodland. What broke your heart about George Reeves?
Hollywoodland, extremely moving story, lovely director, Adrian Brody I loved, Diane Lane I loved. Again, like had the chance to work with really gifted people, and I put a lot of weight for the role, and I remember it was really hard to take it off. I found it to be Bob Hoskins in the movie. It was a beautiful, heartbreaking story about a guy who did really get kind of pigeonholed in this role and the way that affected his life. And I had some things I could identify with that, not the obvious ones or not identical ones, but I understood that you can go into these experiences, movies, any kind of public life, sort of thinking about the job you're doing or viewing it as a job without any sense of what effects and the unintended consequences might be of that, and then you live with them. So I felt a lot of compassion, empathy for Reeves.
The Way Back. What was your experience of playing this character?
The Way Back was a really wonderful experience for me, even though the story of, somebody losing a child is like the worst possible thing that can happen to you. And I really have a difficult time imagining or even wanting to imagine that. I am in recovery and sober myself, so the alcoholism that the guy kind of descended into is something that I could kind of draw on personal experiences for. But really, Gavin is a wonderful director, and all of his movies, whether it's Miracle or Warrior, or Count or The Way Back, he has a real interest in and attention to the people themselves. And he's a great director for actors because he really wants the performance to be good. And I think he has really good taste in terms of what he uses. That felt like very much the beginning of a period in my life and I guess career as an actor where I just wanted to do parts that I personally was really interested in doing and exploring as an actor, and kind of let go a little bit of this concern that I think comes with, any kind of performing job where, you're performing and the audience obviously is a part of that. Awareness of the audience and the hope that the audience likes it and and I think that can lead to wanting to get, people to see it and get positive feedback. And I kind of was able to let go of some of that sort of, do they like it? What do they think? And not think so much about all the strategy of a career and all that stuff, which I'm not very good at anyway. And really, ironically, of course, I feel like that's when I started to really feel the most comfortable and have the most fun as an actor.
Live by Night. Why do we keep coming back to gangster movies?
Hard to say. So something about the gangster movie that just has a very lasting appeal. I think in some ways, because it's writ large, the ambitions that we have. I'm going to do something in my life. I'm going to, I have these dreams. I want to be successful. But there's also something kind of provocative and scary and alluring about doing it within a world where the stakes are kind of life and death. I think that The Godfather and Godfather 2 also have a lot to do with that because those films were so iconic that it sort of established that genre as the great genre of cinema. But Angels with Dirty Faces was an inspiration for me with The Town and Live by Night. And after Argo, I thought this is probably the only chance I'm going to have to do a period gangster movie. And I still feel like as a director, in terms of the technical execution of the movie, I feel like that's probably my best work in some ways. Every sort of shot in that movie I put together in a way that I felt was complicated and interesting and complementary to the movie. And when I look back on it, I really love the movie, and I kind of love what it had to say, in particular the theme around the urgency and the immediacy of like this life right now and the present moment, rather than a distant reward in heaven or even in the future. It's like, this is it. This is what we have only right now. We can't change the past. We're not in the future. The idea of sort of postponing that or assigning like, well, I'm going to tolerate this life until some point in the future, that just doesn't come. What we have is the present moment. And this is sort of a Buddhist idea, but one that I was really drawn to. And I love that movie.
Glory Days. Tell us where the goatee came from.
That was Rich's idea. Rich's the haircut, the faux hawk, and the drumming. I learned to drum the punk rock music and the thing. That was Wilkes. I was being Rich in college in Santa Cruz. Not everything ages well. It didn't even play well at the time. Actually, I don't think it didn't even play at the time because it didn't come out. But all right, go ahead.
Okay, now, what's the first thing that comes to mind when I say this film? Reindeer Games.
I love working with. Well, I love working with John Frankenheimer. He was a tough guy and he yelled all the time, but he'd obviously been through some kind of anger management course because he would be like, props, what the fuck is wrong with this? This is the worst fucking props I've ever seen. And then he'd walk like 3 steps over to craft service and he'd go, this is the best sandwich I've ever had. It's like, somebody told him like, say something nice after you. And so you always knew after he bitched somebody out. I always try to get close to him. Best actor you've ever worked with? Or?
The Sum of All Fears.
Sum of All Fears, Alec and Harrison had played that part, so it was quite daunting. I had been in a Phil Alden Robinson movie before, but only as an extra in Field of Dreams. Playing Jack Ryan was an amazing opportunity. It was this iconic part. I worried and felt that I wasn't up to the task, and then sort of tried to bring that insecurity and, as a critic remarked, insouciance, I had to look the word up at the time, to the role. It means a sort of like fecklessness, like not really capable enough, but, young and, underqualified, I guess. That movie also I loved Montreal and I met and got to work with one of my heroes in Morgan Freeman. Additionally, a wonderful benefit because he was kind enough to come do my first movie I directed.
Boiler Room.
It was my homage to Glengarry Glen Ross and Alec Baldwin's performance. It was really fun. It's probably the best 2 days I've ever done in a movie.
The Company Men.
John Wells, lovely guy, Tommy Lee, Chris Cooper, and I a very sad movie, but one that was really connected to what was going on in the country at the time.
To the Wonder.
I love Terry Malick. I love him, and I've never had an experience like it before or since.
Forces of Nature.
Rama Hughes, Sandra Bullock, and a really beautiful, fun experience in Savannah that I will always remember with huge fondness and nostalgia.
The Tender Bar.
Loved that part. And a good time in my life when I felt wonderful and good about acting, and I loved doing it. And George, I had one of the best relationships with a director in terms of my performance I've ever had. I felt like this was a guy and I was in great hands with.
The Dark End of the Street.
My first movie, I was 7 years old, and I got it by nepotism because my mom's best friend was the casting director and also the wife of the director, Jan Eagleson, and they needed a little kid to be sleeping in a bed and to say a line. And I was 7, and I don't really remember it, but I'm sure I was great.
State of Play.
Kevin McDonald's terrific. That was a really interesting experience shooting in DC. I did a lot of research in Congress. It was a really intense, interesting experience. I went to work with Jason and Rachel McAdams, and it was just spectacular. Alan Mirren, Robin Wright, who's one of, if not the best actor I've ever worked with. Robin Wright is incredible. I mean, you go into a scene with Robin and it's like, all of a sudden she just makes everything true and real. I mean, she can carry another actor. She's a genius. When I worked with her and I thought, oh, this is what can be done. I remain just in awe of her. I tried to get her in movies, but she's always unavailable. So.
Changing Lanes.
Loved that movie. Loved Roger Michell, who is a beautiful director. I've tried to emulate Roger's casting of performances in every single person in the movie. Met Bradley Cooper, been a lifelong friend, I suppose, since then on that movie. Sam Jackson's a guy I just admired enormously and was thrilled to work with. And Toni Collette and Amanda Peet. I really liked that movie, and it was the first time I felt like I got a chance to do a script that was really good and I could sink my teeth into, and I really felt like I wanted to prove something with that movie, and I was ultimately proud of it on balance.
He's just not that into you.
I don't remember one thing about them, except the DP. I remember the cinematographer was John, he's dead now, anyway. Okay, obviously it's not staying with me. All these movies, the final result you really care about. But at the end of the day, what they mean to me really has to do with the experience and what I learned. It's fun. Walk down memory lane. Makes me feel old. Like that guy who's like, before there was talking in movies, you know what I mean? The kind of people, like, I look at all the young people, they're like, oh, wow. You knew P.T. Barnum? It's like, that's right.